Thank you, Ambassador, for the kind introduction. As you said, I have the honor to direct this Mediterranean initiative supported by the World Bank and the European Investment Bank, but more importantly, with the membership and the partnership of most North and South Mediterranean countries, and a number of partners, as you can see, including European, Italian, French, civil society, the city of Marseille that hosts our headquarters at the moment. And we are, by definition, a partnership institution that looks at the Mediterranean from a truly integration perspective, multidisciplinary and multi-partner. Our goal is to strengthen the dialogue between Mediterranean actors for the identification of joint solutions. As you heard this morning from the Minister and the rest of the speakers, we must find joint solutions to what are really joint problems. And it's only through the regional perspective that we can face some of the challenges that were mentioned this morning. This is a land of opportunity, but it's also a land of risk. What do we do at the Center for Mediterranean Integration? We deliver capacity building. It was just mentioned in the previous presentation in reference to the marine, but capacity building applies to many other areas of Mediterranean integration, and it has to do with policy making and the elaboration of solutions for mutual benefit for all the Mediterranean countries. We also do analytical and advisory products. We don't lend, but we prepare the dialogue for the lending institutions to come and support some of the projects in benefit of the Mediterranean. We also create technical hubs and communities of practice precisely to support this continuous dialogue in the Mediterranean. And we help with multi-stakeholder thematic policy exchanges. And this year in particular, we are emphasizing the need to discuss changing approach from talking about migration to talking about regional mobility. When we hear the word migration, it often comes with negative connotations. But when you hear about regional mobility, you can think of all the positive opportunities that come associated with this concept. Because of the topic of the session today, I thought I would say a few words about one of the threats in the Mediterranean that has to do with the climate change. And we know that this is a region that is most affected by climate change in the world. And it's not only because of the drought and the fragility of many states that have water scarcity, but also the fact that the sea level is increasing. When there is no water, there is no food security, and therefore many people lose the opportunity to earn an income, and they are forced to migrate. And then there are many other health risks associated with either the lack of water or the lack of quality in the water that they use. And this is particularly riskier in countries that are close to the coast or near the coast. Here are some numbers. We expect that if nothing is done, this is of course the scenario where adaptation and mitigation will not take place, there will be serious loss of GDP, economic losses of about 1 billion in countries like Morocco and Tunisia, and we expect that the environmental degradation would constitute cost up to 2% of GDP in countries like Tunisia and Jordan, and even up to 4% in other countries. So something has to be done, and this is the bad news, but the good news is that the Mediterranean, the Mare Nostrum, is also a land of wealth, and it's not only physical wealth, but it's also the intangible wealth. In particular, as the map indicates, this is a region rich in solar energy, wind energy, and what we call the renewable energy. So we propose that promote an energy market integration between the North and the South, and also across countries in the South, South-South collaboration. Some countries have the technology, some other countries have the resources, the natural resources. It is only through integration that we will manage to ensure that the flow of energy will respond to the needs of the population. There is a lot of volatility in the supply, and the consumption patterns also change. Therefore, we must be sure that the supply is stable so that the population will always be satisfied, again, to prevent other crises and enforce migration. We need to look at a voluntary approach and resource mobilization where we would involve all actors, the countries, the international organizations, the regulators, the energy companies, and this is what we try to promote at the Center for Mediterranean Integration. Let me say a few words about migration and mobility, switching from migration to regional mobility. There are three main types of migration. I already mentioned the one associated with climate change, but then when we talk strictly about forced displacement and economic migration, these are the two other sources of migratory pressure. We know that Turkey, Lebanon, and Jordan, and even Iraq also, carry the biggest burden of the refugee crisis. In Lebanon in particular, 1/3 of the population is the population of refugees. This is, again, a challenge and an opportunity. In fact, even though there is more pressure in the education services, in the health services, at the same time, the presence of refugees in some countries, for example, in Jordan, has led to the creation of small enterprises because some of the refugees from Syria brought capital with them. They brought capital, they brought qualification. In fact, the qualification of the migrant is not related to the country where he or she comes from. It's related to the education and the experience that he or she has. So this is the contribution that they can make in areas where they can really use the talent. In economics, we always say that transferring resources from low to high productivity areas is positive for growth, and that is the whole notion behind the concept of labor mobility. We heard in the previous presentations about the demographic boom, and we cannot think of the high percentages of young population in the south as a solution for the demographic problems of the north. It would be too much of a simplification. However, we can think that regular and adequate mobility of labor will help not only to boost growth based on this principle of productivity, but it will also help to alleviate the demographic crisis. In the region, there is a combination of factors. The fact that the private sector is not as dynamic as it should be. Many of countries in the Mediterranean still rely on the state to be the one that creates jobs. These are countries with a big tradition of public sector-led growth, and now the public sector is not creating as many jobs as in the past. In fact, the private sector has to become the main engine of growth in order to create more employment and reduce social disparity. We heard also this morning that enhancing human capital holds many, many advantages. And this is really the key to regulatory and proactive migration. Educating the youth in a way that they acquire the skills that they can use not only in the country where they live, but all over Europe, with the standards of quality of education that would be accepted anywhere where they go. This is one of the goals. And this will lead to renewing the social contract between government and citizens that in many countries has been broken. At the same time, creating new employment positions and boosting growth will help the resilience that they need in some of the vulnerable economies in the region. In terms of enhancing the quality of education and fostering the knowledge economy, we can also think of a comprehensive approach to education that starts from early childhood to tertiary education, creating an enabling environment for an entrepreneurial class to flourish. The skills that can be taught in universities today must be adapted to a dynamic labor market. We cannot continue learning the same that we learned years ago because now there is a technology revolution, and the young population must be capable and ready to hit that market that is not just regional, it's global. So So that same capability that we see in other parts of the world, in Asia, in North America, it must be also in MENA and in the Mediterranean. What we try to do also at the CMI is to promote the internationalization of tertiary education. How many students from every country are willing to go to other universities within the region? We heard earlier about the idea of creating an Erasmus for the Mediterranean. That's a great idea, but even before that, there are already a lot of changes that we can see in this data that I'm going to show. Here we can see how, even though the increase in the proportion of international students in tertiary education in the Arab states, for example, has not changed very much, but we see a modest increase. Not as much in other parts of the world, but there is already an opening up of the universities to international students, and this comes with the creation of the knowledge economy and the exchange of skills that are adequate for the labor market. Again, talking about what the students should learn, it's not about being a doctor or a lawyer, it's also about foreign languages. Having the flexibility to adapt to a labor market that's very dynamic. Intercultural understanding. Some of the global values that we must learn in the university are also very applicable when you work in companies that are based all over the world. And interpersonal skills are as important as cognitive skills and of course foreign languages. This again shows that there has been improvement. It shows the inbound mobility rate. That means the students that are coming from abroad to study in different countries. We can see that some countries are behind, but at least we can see some progress. For example, in Jordan, Morocco also. This represents the percentage of students coming to study in the universities from abroad, from other countries, not only in the Mediterranean, but also in the world. So these are just some of the figures to illustrate some of the messages that I wanted to deliver today. But I'd like to end with a positive note. I believe that the fact that we are here today means that we are partners in this big Mediterranean project, and even though we look at it from different perspectives, and marine perspectives, and economics perspectives, and ambassador perspective, we all want the same goal, which is growth and prosperity in the Mediterranean. Thank you very much for the opportunity.